Greetings, people of the interwebs. Jake here. So, let's talk about Alien Earth. So I didn't start watching this show. I don't know. Maybe it was like a week after its debut. Because I remember seeing trailers for it and was interested. But I consider myself a casual Aliens franchise fan. Like obviously the first two were phenomenal and great movies. The first one was a great sci-fi horror movie, very claustrophobic, and then the second one was just a solid sci-fi action film. And then every subsequent film that have come afterwards has been not so good. Hence my trepidation with Alien Earth, because a lot of people were hyping up this show, and I was hearing a lot of really good reviews after, because I can't remember if they debuted the first two episodes back to back, or if it was just, maybe that's when I started watching, was after that second episode had dropped. But anyways, so I decided, I was like, you know what, I'll fire it up, I'll give it a go. And so that first episode was pretty excellent. That first episode is probably the best thing in the Aliens franchise since Aliens, in my opinion. Granted, the bar is not super high, because this franchise is, man, like a lot of the other great franchises. So after episode 1, I was like, okay, you've got my interest, I'm in. This, aesthetically, this show feels so much like that original Alien movie. And same with the score, the people who did set design and the composer, they understood their assignment, and it had a great attention to detail with making it feel like that very, 70s retro futuristic aesthetic of the original Alien movie. And so that's another thing that really locked me in with that first episode. Episode 2, I liked it a little less, because I feel like it felt a little tropey. And then, unfortunately, this show kind of continues a downhill trajectory. Not fully. So, let me think here. And I guess for anyone watching this who's not watched any of my reviews before, I'm not going to go into, episode up by episode breakdown. I'm pretty rambly. So bear with me here. Also, spoilers, so if you haven't, watched the show or finished the show, maybe come back to this review. Or just keep watching if you're not big on, if you don't really care about spoilers. So anyways, my biggest problem with this show is the writing is kind of inconsistent. There's some moments where I really feel like they had something. So I guess brief synopsis to kind of give some context, especially for those who maybe you're watching this and don't care about spoilers or anything like that. So the kind of main storyline of this series is so in the universe at this point in time, 2100 or whatever it is, or 2300, I don't remember, but basically fairly decent amount in the future. The Earth is not ruled by governments, but corporations. And so the newest one is called Prodigy, which is run by a young man. I think he's 19, early 20s. He's not only the youngest trillionaire, but he's also the head of Prodigy. Because, he's definitely no vanity with this guy. But anyways, so he's basically trying to take human consciousness and place them in synthetic bodies to essentially, achieve immortality. And so he takes these group of terminally ill kids, and that's his experiment. Is he wants to see if it's successful, because obviously for him, if these kids die, it's not successful. It's whatever. But if it is successful, then he can kind of come off as this miracle worker, where he's kind of hey, I stopped these young children from dying, and now they have these ageless bodies, and synthetic bodies, which are stronger than the average human body. And again, they don't get sick, they don't have diseases, none of that stuff. So it's kind of like the best of both worlds. And I really like the theme of this because there was a character, probably one of my favorite characters in this show, Moro, who's a cyborg. Where like once he finds out like what the hybrids are, he kind of asks the question of like, you know, at what point does a machine stop becoming a machine? And this is just a slight tangent. This is one of my favorite themes in sci-fi. Is whether it be AI like in Terminator or iRobot or Blade Runner, whatever it may be, is the whole question of like, you know, what constitutes being a human, and obviously something like this, like a hybrid, where you have the human consciousness, where some people consider that to be what differentiates us from like other beings, or you know, in the case of like AI, is we have a consciousness. But if you've essentially taken the consciousness of a human and just placed them in a synthetic body that is more or less, you know, a fully functioning body, would that be considered human? So again, really cool concept. And I feel like this show, I think maybe could have either been split into like two different shows, or like say season one focused more on like the hybrid storyline, and then the second part, which was the other part that I liked that they didn't do a whole lot with, was so Moro he was kind of like the security captain or whatever on the spaceship that we see at the beginning of the show, before they basically crash land on Earth and bring a xenomorph and other aliens to Earth. And I really like the intro, because it, again, felt very much like the original Alien. And I feel like the characters they introduced could have been really interesting. But I kind of understand why they didn't want to do a TV series purely based on like the hybrid storyline, because if you tell a story that's set in like the Alien universe, a lot of people are going to complain. It's like, well, hey, where are the xenomorphs at? So I get that, but I still think that would have been just a conceptually good show to watch. I might be the minority there, but I think that would have been a really cool series in of itself. But then, you know, you could have had the Moro story before like his ship crash lands with the aliens on board and trying to, because there's like a little bit of espionage. Obviously, some of the aliens get loose, and so I think that probably would have maybe felt a little bit more like your standard Alien fare. But I think that still could have been a good story. But anywho, I just think that this show, kind of combining those stories, some of it didn't always mesh well for me, and I don't know. I kind of just feel like this show had some really good ideas, but was not the best executed, and so that's the thing. Is I didn't hate this show because I was still tuning in because I was interested, and even though there were definitely characters who were making very dumb decisions, or very tropey decisions for like not just the Alien franchise but just your typical kind of like horror or thriller movie, I was still kind of like, well, all right, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt because, you know, I can be nitpicky with that kind of stuff. But this show has a lot of major plot holes, and some contrivances, which, again, contrivances, I'm a little nitpicky with, and I can also be forgiving of contrivances if, like, the story's really good, and I can usually overlook that stuff. But this show does have a lot of contrivances. It does have a lot of things that happen for like convenience sake, and you know, just for progressing the story forward. And again, that's another thing that like I can usually overlook that stuff if they're not very I guess if there's not a whole lot of like contrivances or conveniences and stuff like that. Because again, sometimes as a writer, you do have to have those moments for the sake of like propelling the story forward. Of like, well, hey, this character has to talk to this character just for the sake of moving the story along. Let's not dwell too much on it. Fair enough. But this show takes a lot of liberties with their contrivances and conveniences. And one major plot hole, and maybe I just overlooked something, so if you have seen the show and I'm missing something, by all means correct me. So the ship that Morrow is on, that was set for a 65-year journey. Now Prodigy has only been around for 20 years, and yet somehow the boy genius Cavalier, who owns Prodigy, was able to get in touch with someone on that ship and convince them to basically betray the ship and that crew for him, but they don't explain how he knew about this ship that had departed Earth 40 years before he was even born, why he was interested in this ship, other than the fact that it's a rival company, because this ship was owned by Weyland-Yutani, kind of the main antagonistic corporation in the Alien universe. So, again, unless I'm missing anything, they never really explained that. And I mean, sure, could he have heard about this ship's expedition, even though it was 40 years before he was born? Absolutely. Could, I guess in theory, he could have also gotten in contact with that ship? Sure, but how did he know to contact I forget the character's name, but the specific person? And then also I guess it's a little odd too that it obviously was not a very secure line or anything like that, which is odd because you would think if you're trying to get espionage or anything like that going on, you would try to have a secure line to reach that person, your informant. But Morrow, he's the security guy. There's a scene where he's reviewing security footage and sees Cavalier talking to that guy, and basically yeah, here, I'll pay you X amount of millions or whatever if you come basically betray Weyland-Yutani and work for me. And so I don't know, to me that's a really big plot hole. And again, maybe I'm being a little nitpicky, but this show to me as a whole, it's if you look at it from a very surface level, it's still a really good show. Because again, it's very entertaining, has a solid cast, and again, visually, aesthetically, very, very reminiscent of the original Alien movie. Again, really good score. But once you dive a little bit deeper, that's when the problems start to kind of emerge. And that's kind of when I started to like the show less, is kind of as more episodes happen, or as I started to watch more episodes. Because episode 2 definitely has some problems, more so tonally. There's a weird scene, shortly after the spaceship crashes, and there's this weird, I don't know, party going on with these people dressed in kind of 17th century outfits, and for whatever reason they're pretty calm and not too bothered by the fact that a ship just crash landed right into their I guess apartment complex, or that to me felt like something that would be more in line with a Marvel movie. So there's definitely some conflicting tone, but as a whole I was okay, it's still not a bad episode. And then again, just the more I started to watch and the more I started to kind of just ask a few questions and delve a little bit deeper, the more I was ooh, yes, that's not making a lot of sense, or this, I'm enjoying this less. And again, still not to say that this is by any means a bad show. And one of the redeeming qualities, too, is the cast. So you've got, some pretty established actors like Timothy Olyphant as Kirsch, who's a synth. But I think some of the standouts, though, were the actors playing the children, who were, again, these adult synth bodies. In particular, Jonathan Ajayi. I don't think I've seen him before in anything, but I thought he crushed it as essentially playing, a 10, 11-year-old who's in not only an adult body, but an adult synth body. I thought he was definitely one of the standouts. And then, of course, Babu Sise, who plays Morrow, another standout of this show. So really, again, the whole cast was solid, and I wouldn't say anyone was really miscast or a poor choice for any of the roles or anything like that. And I do imagine that all the actors playing the children were probably having a ton of fun. And they still definitely got to have some more dramatic moments. In particular, Sydney Chandler, who's the main character of this show, Lily Newmark, who plays Nibs, then Adar Skurov, who plays Slightly. I feel they got a little bit more like a little bit more to work with, like not just playing like kind of like more lighthearted, aloof children. But still, the whole cast was solid. And I am intrigued with like what they would do with season 2. Although I will say that like the last episode in particular felt a little rushed, and I feel like they were building up to something I didn't think they quite delivered. And again, maybe that's something that they intentionally left, kind of wanted to leave off on a sort of cliffhanger, even if it is a little anticlimactic, to address in season 2, whenever that may happen. But I just feel like the build up just wasn't quite. Just kind of, rather than go out with a bang, it was kind of like a not quite a whimper, but it just went. And so I think had the show maybe had a better ending for the first season, I could kind of be a bit more forgiving with like some of the flaws. But usually if something starts off really strong and sets my expectations, and to be fair, maybe I should have still kept very level expectations and not expected, the quality of that first episode. So I'll take a little bit of responsibility for that. But at the same time, it's like the writing to me in that first episode felt so like tight and so much more solid compared to the rest of the show, where again there's still some really good moments of dialogue, still some really good performances and stuff like that, and still again really cool things where I could kind of see what they were trying to do. Just I don't know, I feel like they wrote themselves into a corner and like I don't know what I'm gonna do now, so I'll just kind of conveniently get myself out of this. So yeah, like it's a show that I would still recommend to people, but I could also, much like a lot of the other movies in the Alien franchise, since Aliens have been kind of divisive, where I could see hardcore Alien fans, because also from what I gather, this show does, like, I do like the world building, and it does seem like, again, from what I've gathered, it is very lore accurate. They don't do a whole lot of, they don't take a lot of creative liberties, I guess, with, like, the lore that's been established in, like, some of the books and obviously some of the previous movies. And for its flaws, I still feel like it's a nice step in the right direction compared to Alien Romulus, which to me it wasn't a horrible movie, but it just felt like Alien, like, the greatest hits of the Alien franchise. It just didn't feel, again, kind of credit to that movie too, though, is again aesthetically and felt very much like the original Alien movie. Had a really good score, but everything else just felt very, again, greatest hits, where it's like felt very safe, except for the ending. That the hybrid alien baby, I know that's in the lore, like, but that's kind of where I lost it with that movie. And I was like, okay, this maybe went from being a okay movie to just, this is dumb. I'm out. And same thing like Prometheus and Alien Covenant, where I like the concept of Prometheus. I just, again, execution was not great. Visually beautiful movie, but yeah, I just feel like Aliens can't find that nice like balance of trying to be too safe and appeal to the fans of like the franchise, but also trying to like try some new things to get newer fans. So I'll give Alien Earth credit for like it. I feel like it overall kind of towed that thin line of like trying something new-ish, but still having some familiarity to it. But again, just not the best execution. And I will be curious to see how this show is kind of looked upon, maybe like even a few weeks down the road. Because, I don't know, there's even a possibility that maybe once I think a little bit more on this show, I might think more highly of it, might think lesser of it. This is just kind of my initial thoughts after the finale, is it's maybe a step below, or a step above okay. I still wouldn't quite say it's good necessarily, but it's I think it's worth checking out. And so I guess those are my overall very rambly thoughts on Alien Earth. Let me know what you thought. Did you enjoy it? Did you dislike it? Are you kind of in the middle? And I would say what's your favorite Alien movie, but I feel like it's like a 50-50 between Alien and Aliens. Unless you want to throw out a wild card and say, like, Alien 4 or something like that. In which case, hats off to you. Well, yeah, that's totally fine. But anywho, that wraps up this rambly review. Do usual YouTube stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. And until next time, everyone, cheers.